G'day YouTube, Warbles on a lot here. Welcome to May the 5th, 1942 for my chronological broadcast in looking through the sea backroscope to examine what happened 79 years ago today in the Battle of the Coral Sea. All the information in this broadcast comes from Jack Riddell's book. And today we'll not only have a look at the unit history sheet after I have a go at plotting the 4 flights which took place today 79 years ago, and I think I can plot them all on this, the largest chart that I have of the area, then I'm going to read this letter from Murray Brown, who was navigator on A2418 and A2430. The letter covers the events of May the 3rd to May the 8th. While I'm reading the letter, I'll probably let you just gaze wistfully onto this chart, which shows the movements of the major forces during the battle. Yesterday, May the 4th, the American Task Force 17 was there off the end of the pincer point, approximately 200 miles away from Tulagi, which is where the Japanese fleet was bombed by US B-17s flying from Australia. Today, 5th of May, that's where the Americans are, and that's where the Japanese are. The covering group Gato with the carrier Shoho and the cruisers. We begin with A2420 from Townsville. A travel flight by Catalina aircraft A2420, Captain Squadron Leader G. Hemsworth, Second Pilot Sergeant J. Coulter of 20 Squadron was made from Townsville to Morseby, alighting at Cairns en route and carrying out a reconnaissance from Cairns to position 17 degrees no minutes south, 147 degrees no minutes east, which they describe as being Cape Rodney. It shows up on my map as Cape Flattery, and it's that white pin just slightly to the right of the red one being on Cairns. So that's the reconnaissance, and sightings nil. Also, departing from Cairns, A2417, event L, chart 1, which shows the event occurring just about there. Catalina aircraft A2417, Captain Flight Lieutenant F. Chapman, Second Pilot Flying Officer P. Marsh, to carry out a night reconnaissance. Rossel Spit, Laughlin Island, Woodlark Island, Jombard Passage, thence to Bougainville Passage. Changing maps, we have Cairns. Be honest with you, I can't locate Lorgan Island, but the next step is Woodlark Island. And with Rossel Island there, Woodlark Island there, I'm going to guess that Lorgan Island is halfway between the two, somewhere. Also surveilling the Jombard Passage. And with that island there being Bougainville, they are ordered to search the Bougainville Passage, which I'm guessing is between Bougainville and Shortland Island. But I could be wrong. It might be between Bougainville and New Britain, or Bougainville and Mulliony. I don't know where Bougainville Passage is, because how many passages are there around an island? So if you bear in mind that the Catalinas out there at about midnight, and the point off the end of the dividers is where the Japanese were bombed by B-17s coming out of Australia on the 5th of May, then it's probably not surprising that Flight Lieutenant Chapman and his crew had a bit of a busy trip with lots of things to see. Aircraft sighted 2 enemy vessels and a large aircraft carrier, 2 battleships or heavy cruisers travelling east, 2 submarines and 1 tender. Airborne at 16:55 hours local time and returned to Cairns. Flying time 19 hours and 20 minutes. I'm assuming that 16:55 is 5 to 5 in the afternoon the previous evening, so that they could get out there in the middle of the night and then return to Cairns. in time for the B-17s to be out there attacking at 10:30. That means a radio message from the Catalina. About the only way I can see they could have got the B-17s on time at that place from this reconnaissance, assuming that the information came from this reconnaissance. Next we have A2420 from Morseby. Below that, I got the place right. Aircraft was A2412, because today I'm going to try and keep it in the listed order. A reconnaissance of an area formed by the lines joining Port Morseby, Shortland Island, Tulagi. And if we're going to look at Shortland Island, we need this map. So we have Port Morseby, there. Shortland Island, Tulagi. We'll let that pin on the very edge of the map stand in for Bougainville, which is actually, or Shortland Island, which is actually about another 50 or 60 miles north from there. Shortland Island to Tulagi, 11 minutes 20 seconds south, 160 degrees 30 minutes east, and that's Renell Island, R-E-N-N-E-L-L. 13 degrees 50 minutes south, 154 degrees 30 minutes east, then 11 degrees 50 minutes south, 154 degrees east, and then we go to 154 degrees east, 9 degrees 20 minutes south, 9 degrees 20 minutes south, 155 degrees Finally, I unconfused myself. 9 minutes 20 degrees south, 155 degrees 9 minutes east. So that's there. So the idea is Port Morseby, Shortland Island, Tulagi, Renell Island, out here to a point in the sea, Rossel Island, back up here, and then back to Morseby. This flight was carried out by Catalina aircraft A2412, Captain Flight Lieutenant N.D. Fader, second pilot, Pilot Officer Tiny Lowbridge. Captain reported 2 enemy vessels, probably heavy cruisers and tender, in a position 8 degrees south, 152 degrees 33 minutes east, which appears to be where that little white-headed pin is, to the east of Pocklington Reef. But action was evaded. Flying time 14 hours 18 minutes. A2412 was airborne at Morseby 0410 local and landed at 1800 local. Landed 1800 local at 0935 local. Perhaps that refers to the next flight. I get the idea that when Jack Riddell was putting this together, it was the first time he'd ever attempted to compose a book. He was on a limited budget and he was trying to fit a lot of information into a small amount of space, and he didn't quite have the understanding of the importance of leaving a bit of blank paper between one point of information and the next point of information so that your readers can actually understumble what you're trying to say. But anyway, that there then does that tightly written chunk of print between the points of the dividers. And having scanned this, I'm afraid I can't make any actual sense out of that line there at 0935 local. Doesn't fit either of the two entries. So we move on to the final flight of the day, A2420, once again out of Morseby. A2420, Captain, Squadron Leader R.L. Atkinson, second pilot POTL Dugan, was airborne at Morseby 0628 hours local and landed at 1807 local. At 11:29 local, in position In position, 09:49, 9 minutes 49, 9 degrees 49 minutes south, 156 degrees 26 minutes east. Sighted a seaplane carrier of about 7,000 tonnes to Kagamaru, but I'm guessing that is similar to Kagamaru, but 4 sets of goalpost masts. On approach, the carrier turned beam to wind, possibly to launch aircraft, but none seen. At 12 hours 27 minutes local time, in position 10 degrees 49 minutes south, 155 degrees 49 minutes east, sighted one Serial 43 flying boat and took cloud cover. At 13 hours 47 local, sighted two 2,000-tonne merchant vessels in position 10 degrees 40 minutes south, 154 degrees 5 minutes east. Both were cargo ships, quote, 3 island types. No further sightings, flying time 13 hours 50 minutes. So they've gone from Morseby out to here, up to here, down to here, and back to Morseby. Presumably, they've flown out and done a bit of a backtrack zigzag search, but that's conjecture. Okay, so that's what we get from the operational record sheet of the unit history book. And now we'll have a little bit of a look at what Murray Brown had to say. From Murray Brown, Navigator, A2418 and A2420, bracket Captain Dick Atkinson. Address Burringbar, New South Wales, 2483, 30th of May, 1991. So 20 years ago. Coral Sea. Dear Jack, I have recently found my logbook and can now tell you that on the 3rd of May 1942, I crewed as navigator with Dick Atkinson, captain, later CO of 20 Squadron, and Terry Dugan, second pilot on A2418, while the rest of the crew remained unchanged from the previous day. Something was afoot. We were told to go to a datum at Milne Bay and patrol the track north by northeast towards Rabaul and report on what we saw. However, when airborne, we were instructed to continue the search for a missing B-26 that had lost an engine on a raid on Rabaul and, contrary to the accepted belief at the time, had flown on one engine for a time before putting down on some of the myriad of islands in the Trobriands, bracket Kirrawheena group, or Woodlark, or d'Entrecasteaux Island, or Lewiside Archipelago, etc., possibly Gasmata, like looking for a needle in a haystack. But we did have one clue, quote, landing near Francine's place, unquote. Just north of Samarai, we saw a large Lakatai, so Dick put her down in the open and taxied towards them. It was crewed by natives and part of the Harris Navy and was taking army survivors to Milne Bay from New Britain. To our surprise, Francine, they told us, was the daughter of the French missionary in the Trobriands. So off we went, and after a search, and remember that there are a hell of a lot of islands in those areas, we located a B-26 in the middle of what looked like a large clearing. It looked solid enough. The kite was up on its nose. Obviously tried to land with its nose wheel down. I took a photo with the official camera, bracket, was it a B-24, close bracket, which turned out very well. No survivors were in evidence. We feared the worst. However, we landed again a few miles up at the nearest village. They knew of nothing. Off again, went back to the crash site and saw some native figures. Off to another sizable village, and out came 3 canoes with 2 American survivors to each. They told us that the captain was Lieutenant Heron, an American, and the second Dick was Squadron Leader Bob Gurney, CO of 33 Squadron, who had gone along to help, as he was a very experienced New Guinea area pilot. Both of them had been killed. The area looked solid, so Heron had decided to do a normal landing. He thought, and rightly so, that the engine could be repaired and the plane could be salvaged. But, alas, it was all mud. The hands of the 6 survivors were mutilated. With no tools, they tried to get Gurney and Heron out with their bare hands. Despite all this, they were a little piqued at being rescued so soon. The Trobrians are islands of free love, and the maidens are dusky and comely. Beetle nut is the only deterrent. Gurney Field in New Guinea, Milne Bay, is named after Bob. The aircraft we were in was A2418. It went down the next day and was one of the Catalina victims of the Coral Sea. They changed the 2 pilots and the navigator, but left the rest of the crew on board. A dastardly procedure. They, the powers that be, must have thought them some kind of automatons. Terry Duigan had been involved in another rescue of a B-26 crew some time earlier as skipper of A2421 on the 6th of April. Again, a RAAF pilot, Squadron Leader Tom McBride Price was the second pilot, also a CO of 20 Squadron at the one time, to assist the inexperienced USANF crews to locate the targets. Don't know what the N is in there. I suppose United States Army Navy Force crews, perhaps, maybe. Of course, Rebelle was a hotbed of ack-ack at this period, at the assembly port for the Coral Sea invasion fleet. As the assembly port. I later heard when shortly after for a short time I acted as air transport officer in NEA and the status officer for the US 19th and 20th Bombardment Group, that the spark plug harness was not suitable for the tropics, so the B-26s were withdrawn. A number must have gone down. After 11 hours 15 minutes in the air, we landed back at Moresby just on dark. A number of Catalinas had been shot up at this period, so it was not a good idea to get back home too early. You know of the story of one poor bloke leaning over to close the blister when something happened to his private regions. He survived, but that was the end of that line. The Catalinas continued to patrol and, as I say, A2418 and all aboard board it the next day, 4th of May, 1942. On the 5th, Dick, Terry and I took off in A2420 with the same instructions. The news was that the invasion fleet was on its way. Further to the southeast, the aircraft carriers and supporting naval vessels were searching for each other. We knew nothing of this. The aircraft carriers met on the 6th to the 8th, which is why I'm reading this to you now. Tomorrow's the day it all gets pretty hot. We carried out a creeping line ahead search, and somewhere north of the Trobrians, in some 6/10 of cloud, thank goodness, we came across a seaplane tender, some 7,000 tonnes, and 2 troop carriers patrolled by a Kawanasi flying boat. At the time, our machine guns were 303s. Later, the 2 in the blisters were replaced by .5s or 50 calibre Brownings. No match for a Kawanasi, who had a cannon in the mid-upper turret. Anyway, they were pretty crook shots. They missed us, and there was enough cloud for us to get away and continue our search. No doubt the seaplane carrier had been used to deliver float planes to De Boyne Island the previous day, as 3 of these commenced operations from there on the 4th of May. The intelligence people knew of this but had not passed it on to us. A 0 on floats would have been hard to contend with, especially with our 303s. We landed back at Moresby after last light after 13 hours and 50 minutes in the air. A2620 took off the next day, May 6, with the same crew aboard. They should have had a union. It was brought down, another Coral Sea victim. Skipper A2418 was Snowy Norman, Allen. Skipper A2420 was Gough Hemsworth of the McRobertson England Air Race Australia fame. Gough in the film. You have the names of the rest of the crews, I believe. They should be up in lights. How many hours they were doing, God only knows. The 6th 7th and 8th of May was pretty nerve-wracking time in Moresby. Nobody seemed to know what was going on. In the invasion fleet, from all reconnaissance, there seemed to be 22 vessels, certainly more than anything at Moresby could hold off, and Australia for that matter. At 2100 hours on the 8th of May in the officers' mess, blacked out, we were addressed by the RAAF CO of the squadron, of the station, Squadron Leader Hoot Gibson, backed up by the officer in command of the area, Wing Commander Pearce, and told that we had to walk back to Roona Falls, about 18 miles away, and await further instructions. There were 4 of us navigators together, all off 14 course, Charlie Barr, Jack Lancaster, Roy Hallett and myself. And we were given a gun. Bracket, not that a piddly 38 revolver we carried, close bracket, could be of use. However, Hoot reckoned that we would do more harm than good. A bugger of a yarn, we had purloined a Yank 30 carbine, so on the strength of this, after release at Roona Falls, we would walk across to Daru, across the strait from Thursday Island. In our young impetuosity, we forgot about the Fly River and the hundreds of miles of crocodile-infested swamps. Still, better than being taken by the Japs. Jack, of course, later on, bought it with Clem Hayden. That was apparently the plan for what to do if Port Morseby was invaded following an unsuccessful Coral Sea action for the Allies. However, reprieve for some of us. In the early hours of the 9th, the Taroona came into port. You may remember that it was a flat-bottomed affair that travelled from Melbourne to Launceston and Hobart to get up the rather shallow rivers. It could not take all the aircrew, so we had to draw straws. Jack and I went, Roy and Charlie stayed. Jack and I spent 4 days of tropical cruise to Townsville, all very interesting, but apart from a few submarines, not part of the Coral Sea. We did have a Jap pilot on board from the first Zero they shot down at Moresby. He was scared, gave us confidence. You know, like Anzac Day, we in Australia should have a National Coral Sea Day. We were close to all pushing rickshaws. We who were that close, I know, it is imbued in our bones. We, bracket Catalinas, must put on a good show next year. 50th anniversary. I intend to, for the first time, polish my medals. 46 years of grime. Regards, Murray Brown. So, once again, with that line about the rickshaws, we see a clear example of how the people who were on the front line defending Australia against the Japanese, they had no idea at all whatsoever that the Japanese never intended to come any further south than 10 degrees. So to them, the fact that there was only 2 squadrons of Catalinas out there between Australia and the Japanese invasion fleet that was trying to come down from Rabaul and go and take Moresby to be part of the Japanese southern boundary of their greater East Asian co-prosperity sphere with rectilinear boundaries. As far as they were concerned, they were all it was. They were it. If they let the Japanese get past them, all of Australia was going to be speaking Japanese, eating rice and pulling rickshaws. Nobody told them that it was actually merely a holding action to stop the Japanese from landing on Moresby. And even the ones who survived the war believed that the rest of their lives they went to their graves, unable to accept the fact that their chain of command had not told them the truth about what they were doing and what was going on. So, back tomorrow with another chronological revelation in the story of what happened 79 years ago. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. Ciao.